Cool. We got a few people gathered. So, it's just every damn time I just have a thought. I just have a thought which I don't even think is controversial or should be controversial. And then, people get so mad and they I don't know what, like, all I was thinking of was I see like when I see like a big machine doing something or like digging up the earth. I'm really just thinking about this because the park nearby me got hit with that storm and a bunch of branches fell and like the trees are like sort of fallen, And so then like all these like big machines have to come in to like excavate and move all this stuff around, and then people show up to like plant new things there and stuff, and then it's like really nice again. And I watched all this happen over the last like 2 weeks, and I was like, this is like, this is nature, right? Like, this is the destruction of nature. Nature destroys itself. And if there's any real beauty in it, we're the only ones who appreciate it for our own reasons. We set that up, like that wasn't done by volunteers. It was a state project to beautify the area. You know what I mean? Like, so I just appreciate, like, in the same way, I had a tweet a long, long time ago about how I don't think you can really understand David Lynch if you think that factories are disgusting or ugly. Like, if you don't have a sort of like aesthetic reaction to like shots of lumber mills and things, to think that like the production of things in and of themselves are beautiful, to think of like a factory floor as like a sort of miraculous sort of thing, like I don't know, just like industry. This is like general like Walt Whitmanian style American transcendentalism is all I'm talking about here, is the appreciation of machines as being like, if we're going to call everything that fucking exists nature, then machines are also nature. And so like this is like Thoreau writing about how this, hearing the oncoming railroad in the forest and things like this, that it's sort of like this meshing of two things. I think about the, like, I don't know, I mostly think about pretty basic stuff these days because I try to see the world through the eyes of a baby. And I was just out again in this park not too long ago, with the baby, and she just goes. She sees anything, she wants to tear it to shreds. She sees grass, she's gonna pull it up and sniff it and see if she can eat it, and throw it into the wind and just like walk away from it. You show her a flower, she's gonna try to eat it. That's what we're here to do. That's like the most natural thing in the world, is actually to, as a human being, to quote unquote destroy nature, to like turn it into some sort of reflection of ourselves. Nature in and of itself, the sort of absence, with the absence of man, is a complete void. That's what the rest of the cosmos is. The majority of existence and the whole entire cosmos is nothingness. So if that is, when you talk about nature in this sense, or some god of nature, you're really talking about an absence, a nothingness, a void. Everything that's not, that's a dead god. That is a god of death. Is nature, is Satan's church. So I figured, I also have my library here, so I can now pull down my editions and just quote from them directly. So I've got my complete poetry and prose of William Blake right here, and you know what? You just go to page one, and I'll read a couple pages here. This is page one through two and a half. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all we're going to do is we're going to read these pages. We got some dense stuff here, and we can maybe unpack it if you'd like. But the first work here, all religions are one, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. The argument, as the true method of knowledge is experiment, the true faculty of knowing must be the faculty which experiences. This faculty I treat of. Principle number one, that of the poetic genius is the true man, and that the body or outward form of man is derived from the poetic genius. Likewise, that the forms of all things are derived from their genius, which by the ancients was called an angel and spirit and demon. Principle two, as all men are alike in outward form, so and with the same infinite variety, all are alike in the poetic genius. Principle three, no man can think, write, or speak from his heart, but he must intend truth. Thus, all sects of philosophy are from the poetic genius adapted to the weaknesses of every individual. Principle four, as none by traveling over known lands can find out the unknown, so from already acquired knowledge, man could not acquire more. Therefore, a universal poetic genius exists. Principle five, the religions of all nations are derived from each nation's different reception of the poetic genius, which is everywhere called the spirit of prophecy. Principle six, the Jewish and Christian testaments are an original derivation from the poetic genius. This is necessary from the confined nature of bodily sensation. Principle seven, as all men are alike, though infinitely various, so all religions and as all similars have one source. The true man is the source, he being the poetic genius. Okay, that's that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good stuff. We break it down really fast here. What do we want to call the poetic genius? We could call it the faculty of imagination. You could call it the collective consciousness of mankind. You could call it whatever you want. Blake would say Jesus Christ is the representative of the poetic genius in its greatest form. That this is why the Jewish and Christian testaments are an original derivation from the poetic genius, i.e., it's like the most realized form of this collective consciousness. I would say, I wrote about this not too long ago, that this is necessary. He says this is necessary from the confined nature of bodily sensation, i.e., like from material conditions, this is necessarily the case. I would agree, considering Israel right there is the center of Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's the center of trade and like world consciousness, even through into antiquity. So by necessity, this is where this derivation of the poetic genius would instantiate itself. Um, on to the next part here. There is no natural religion. The argument, man has no notion of moral fitness but from education. Naturally, he is only a natural organ subject to sense. 1. Man cannot naturally perceive but through his natural or bodily organs. 2. Man by his reasoning power can only compare and judge of what he has already perceived. 3. From a perception of only three senses or three elements, none could deduce a fourth or fifth. 4. None could have other than natural or organic thoughts if he had none but organic perceptions. 5. Man's desires are limited by his perceptions. None can desire what he has not perceived. 6. The desires and perceptions of man, untaught by anything but organs of sense, must be limited to objects of sense. This is his first rendition of this, the first time he published it. We're going to read the second rendition, the more perfected rendition of There is no natural religion. 1. Man's perceptions are not bounded by organs of perception. He perceives more than sense, though ever so acute, can discover. 2. Reason, or the ratio of all we have already known, is not the same that it shall be when we know more. I'll repeat that one again. This one's very, very, very dense, and it's very precise. And it some people, you could read this sentence to them 150 times, and they'd get just keep tripping up on a part of it. So we're gonna go slow. Reason, or the ratio of all we have already known. Reason to Blake is not prophetic. It is not revelatory. It is incapable of revealing. It is only an arrangement of pre-existing knowledge or sense data. Revelation, poetic genius, the imagination, is not determined in the same way. The reason, or the ratio of all we have already known, is not the same that it shall be when we know more. This is also the issue, effectively, with debate, rational debate, and rationality, talking about what's reasonable, etc. The whole argument in debate is determined by and bounded by the perceptions of the participants. If you have perceived, let's talk about like historicity, historically, you're talking to someone who goes, well, Stalin killed 100 million people. Well, did you? Is there any reasoning with this person? Can you reason with them? They have to know more. They have not perceived. They're not dealing with the thing in and of itself. If you're coming from something, another thing, you perceive, you've read, you've looked into it more. For instance, you've investigated it more yourself. The person you're talking to, the only way you can alter their reason is to alter the things that they have perceived. So how do you make someone perceive, let's say, a whole time period in history, the literature of which this person has not touched whatsoever? How are you going to give that to them in an instant? It's very difficult, especially if they believe they've already perceived the whole thing. I've already perceived that whole issue. I don't need to do any more investigation of that. I've perceived all of it. I've built my reasoning around the perceptions I have at this moment. I do not need to go perceive in some discover some new things about this, because that will destroy all of my reasoning. All of your reasoning. Like this is what's great about growing up, if you keep reading, is like when you're 15, you can build a whole fucking philosophical system off of your extremely limited perceptions and sense data. And you can be very rigorous about it. And you can be in a hermetically sealed chamber of your reasoning from pure first principles, even. You can derive a whole philosophical system. And then you're 15 years old. And then when you're 30, it'll seem completely insane to you that was your reasoning, because you can't know what you don't perceive. This is already in where does he say this? Man's desires are limited by his perceptions, as Blake said. All right. Anyway, we'll continue on. The bounded is loathed by its possessor. The same dull round even of a universe would soon become a mill with complicated wheels. The bounded is loathed by its possessor. The same dull round, even of a universe, would soon become a mill with complicated wheels. So, the bounded is loathed by its possessor. Blake does not believe in bounds, that there is, that when you see the edge of a thing and you say this is the boundary, this is a definition, this is not the case. The same dull round, even of a universe, would soon become a mill with complicated wheels. You then go, Well, where's the you try to define any word, any term here. You can zoom in on it as much as you want. It will very soon become a fucking universe, a mill with complicated wheels. And you'll have to define each of these little other parts. And it ends up being inexhaustible. Everything to Blake is infinite and infinitely inexhaustible to the point that us creating definitions is an insane task. Okay, next. If the many become the same as the few when possessed, more is the cry of a mistaken soul. Less than all cannot satisfy man. If the many become the same as the few when possessed, more is the cry of a mistaken soul. Less than all cannot satisfy man. If the many become the same as the few when possessed. What do the few want? I've made million threads about the one, the many, and the few. This sort of trifecta here, which corresponds politically to monarchy, aristocracy, democracy. One, the monarchy, autocracy, however you want to put it, tyranny. The one, the few. You have oligarchy. The many, you have democracy, oligarchy, aristocracy. The few. What do the few want? More. What if the many become the same as the few when possessed? When the many take up these aristocratic ideals, oligarchic ideals for themselves, i.e., in a democratic manner, what do they cry for? More. If this is the whole like thing that all the Western communists also don't understand about, say, defending constitutional rights for the many, right? Well, the constitutional rights were actually only for the few. They were actually only inscribed for the few. Didn't you know that? They're reactionary because they were described for the few. Okay, but what if the many want those rights? Now what is it? Less than all cannot satisfy man. So what is this all if the many are reproducing, possessed by the ideology of the few, and they are demanding what the few demand, but for themselves, less than all cannot satisfy man. This is this is all that this could be the entire Communist Manifesto in one sentence. Anyway, onward. If any could desire what he is incapable of possessing, despair must be his eternal lot. So once again, if any could desire what he is incapable of possessing, despair must be his eternal lot. Therefore, if one desires, and he is not, like, in order to avoid despair, then it must be capable of possessing it. So for this is you've got what this is completely against like Mark Fisher capitalist realism nonsense. I could desire communism, but we're just incapable of possessing it. So therefore, despair must be our eternal lot. Transcendental miserableism. No, we if we desire what we not less than all cannot satisfy us, and we can get it. Therefore, despair is not our eternal lot because we can desire all and we are capable of possessing all. Onward. The desire of man being infinite, the possession is infinite and himself infinite. Conclusion. If it were not for the poetic or prophetic character, the philosophic and experimental would soon be at the ratio of all things and stand still, unable to do other than repeat the same dull round over again. This is where we're at with Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. The poetic and prophetic character of Twitter has been destroyed as of late. We are at the philosophic and experimental ratio of all things. The ratio of all things, everyone ratioing each other. The philosophic and experimental STEM Lord autists are doing the same dull round over and over and over again. My God, how many months are people going to argue about racial IQ scores? It's the same dull round over and over and over again. Will Stancil and whatever the fuck, all these other guys. It's all the same shit over and over and over again. There's no poetic or prophetic character to this. All right. Application of all of this. He who sees the infinite in all things sees God. He who sees the ratio only sees himself only. I love Blake's little repetitions in he who sees the ratio only sees himself only. Only sees himself only. Therefore, God becomes as we are, that we may be as he is. The end. First 2.5 pages of the complete prose and poetry of William Blake. Enough to chew on for the rest of your life, if you ask me. All right, let me crack this beer before we get into talking about other stuff. If you don't see the infinite in a wheel excavator, okay? If you do not see the infinite in the wheel excavator, if you don't want to believe in terraforming planets, inhabiting the entire cosmos, moving mountains by faith, then what are you doing? Then despair must be your eternal lot. Because I desire those things, and I do not believe we're incapable of possessing them. So I can revel and joy in that, in my speculative, my flights of fancy here, because I know that it's possible and that we will do it. I may not see it, but I don't care about that. I'm unbounded. I don't need to care solely about the boundaries of my sense experiences because this is something I feel like you feel more intuitively when you have a child. You go like, I don't care if that's for me. Like I know that there's things carrying on beyond me. And like I don't live in my own bounds, you know? I'm trying to live in the infinite. So anyway, we got B Shark who wants to chat. So what's up, B Shark?
Hello.
What's up, man?
Uh, your definition of nature is completely wrong. If you go to Latin in the definition of nature, actually simply
Did
means
you
birth.
hear a goddamn all right. Did you hear a goddamn thing I just read? Did you hear a fucking goddamn thing I just read? Are you going to tell me that we're going to define nature? You're going to limit
No, because the
nature.
meaning of
What is
nature has
nature
literally been
infinite?
changed for no reason.
Is
They
nature
changed it to
infinite?
wild for no reason.
Is nature infinite? Yes or no?
Birth is infinite, so yes,
So nature is infinite.
birth is infinite.
Is
At least
nature
as
No, no, no.
nature
Repeat it.
as
Is
Dante
nature
understood it
infinite? Is
is okay.
nature
Okay, why does
infinite?
Dante have nature as like a fucking like usury is a crime against nature? Why does Dante have that as a crime against nature?
Why? Because he was writing then. I'm talking about William Blake. We moved on. We're dialectically progressing here. We're
Okay,
infinite. We're
dude.
not
Okay, dude.
bounded
You
in the
just
Middle
wanna you
Ages.
just like changing things for no reason. I guess I get it.
So does God. Boom. Infinite. Things are changing. Ah, no reason.
No, he's
Oh,
not.
it transcends your reason. It's this thing that's surpassing your
Okay, okay. What
reason.
has God changed from now and like 600 years ago? What has he changed?
I don't know, dude. Hey, look out the window. Is it
Exactly. You don't
1400?
know.
Is it 1400? Is it
Yes, it's
1400 outside?
1400. It is 1400.
It is. It's the
It
eternal same
is.
dull round. Has it
No,
turned
no, no.
into
It
a
is
meal, a
1400 because
universe
they
of
lied about how
mills
many years there
and
were.
cogs? Despair must be your eternal lot, B Shark. Despair must be your eternal lot. Wow. To avoid the same dull round, I will just remove the speaker. We're going to go into Latin definite. Well, actually, people talked about nature differently 600 years ago than they do now. We must bound our sense perceptions to the sense perceptions of the 1400s because, based medieval Catholicism. Kill yourself. Okay, I probably shouldn't say that. But despair must be your eternal lot. All right. Who else? Anyone want to talk? I think that was fun. The guy straight up went straight to definitions. Like as I told you, this was 2.5 pages of William Blake. That's it. That's it. 2.5 pages. And I read it and I went slowly, line by line. And what do we get? First opportunity we get to hear someone go, actually the definition of nature changed. Birth is infinite, but so is nature infinite? Yes, it is. Why is okay? So I can answer his question now, or is a provocation here. Why did Dante call usury a crime against nature? Because Dante again sees nature as infinite. Okay, there's an infinite growth. Growth. What does usury do? It creates infinite debt. It slows growth. Therefore, it is a crime against flourishing, the flourishing of humanity, the flourishing of nature, the flourishing of civilization. It is a crime because it is diminishing the infinite into a definite thing. That is what debt does. All right, we got modern Yankee poet. What can I do for you, pal?
Hey, so you were talking about like the destruction of nature being beautiful.
Yes.
In would you say in all ways that's true? Like even like dumping chemicals into water.
I mean, like, what's beautiful? I mean, is everything beautiful, or are there things that are not beautiful? Is beauty infinite, or is it finite? Is it definite?
I guess that would be subjective to the definition of beauty, and then that goes back to your argument. Yeah, true. Fair enough. Fair enough.
You ever see gasoline in a puddle? Like, say you ever like take a boat out and some of the gasoline gets into the water and it's like a rainbow reflecting. Is that beautiful?
It is pretty to look at. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So also, like, if you think of all of these things, pollution, et cetera, all these things, you might say like they have deleterious effects in context and things like this. But even the overcoming of these things is in some way beautiful. In the same way that, like, you could say there's a beauty in evil as well, but it's not as beautiful. It is not the same thing as the beauty of the good. But this dialectic, this overcoming of like the appreciation of all of these things is good. Like you could like when you see a smokestack from an oil refinery or something. Is that beautiful? I think so.
It definitely reminds me of my childhood, to say the least. It's got like a nostalgic beauty. Yeah, you're right. You're fair enough. Fair enough. That was mostly my only question.
No, I just think that there's people have like in general this description of nature. We have like a whole nature cult, the cult of this non-god of like worshiping like it's just anti-humanism is what it is. And ultimately any form of anti-humanism is against God. like like God is not an anti-humanist, but all of these conceptions, if you even look at the replies to my tweets and things, come from this notion of like man is a hubristic ape who must be punished, you know? Like this is their conception of God is literally of Satan, like they worship Satan, they worship the accuser. They do not see the image of God in man. They see flesh. That's it. Nothing more. When they see a big rock or a tree, they go, that is so much more beautiful than man. That is what Lucifer says, right?
What you mean is like when they look at the progress of humanity, they're questioning God's will and sovereignty, basically, right?
Well, they say that God's will and sovereignty is expressed through the its opposition to man. You see, they say God kills us, right? God is why there is God created not enough food for everyone so that the poor starve. That's God to them because that's part of the God's plan. The weak die and the strong flourish and enslave. That's God's plan. You see, that's what they see in God. God is just the punisher to them. He's not the liberator.
The Sky Man, as they say. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day. Health to your child and your wife. God bless you.
God bless, man. All right. Just next, anyone come on up. We can talk about anything, not just this if you want, but that's just been obviously on my mind because that's what I straight up like I'm like I don't know why people get so mad about these things. It's so confusing to me because it just seems obvious to me that this guitar was made in a factory, for instance. Trees were leveled to make the wood here. There's varnish on it. There's these steel strings which are pulled from the earth. You see what I'm saying? Like so much. how is it like? Is this? I don't know. Like, what's uh what's so lamentable about all of this? I think it's great. All right, we got Kareem Wadib. Speaking of which, I gotta see Dune 2. I haven't seen a movie in theaters in a long time, but I actually have made plans so I can see Dune 2 this week. So I'm gonna see Dune 2. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, man? First off, I just want to say, like, that guy, Kareem, right? He comes off weird, but don't worry, he's not ill-intentioned. But I actually have a question.
For sure.
So for terraforming and all these questions on the Earth, I do actually agree, of for the supremacy of man over nature. But when it comes to man's relation to himself, for example, I think that's where it becomes like a gray zone. For example, you could have people like defending like transhumanism, and we see recently in sexuality like transgenderism and all these questions. Like they're gonna apply like the same logic that you're using. Seemingly, I know it's not the same, but seemingly they'll
Yeah,
apply to man himself, and then they'll say, "Oh, this is what it means to change nature," basically. So
for
how would
sure.
you respond to that? Yeah.
Well, I would say if you just say like if you come at it from like a sort of Ludditic perspective or something and say like, okay, well, we're just like anti-transhumanism, so we're just going to say no to all of this stuff, then you would just lose. Then despair
Right.
is your eternal lot. Because I think we can have all of these things without them being the way that they are now. Like all of like if you look at like I personally, I don't know how other people feel. If someone's 20 years old or whatever and they want to shoot themselves up with testosterone or whatever the fuck they want to do, they want to fuck around in that way with themselves. I don't
Right.
care. I
Yeah.
really don't care. It really doesn't bother me at all. Doesn't bother me at all. But what I'm bothered by is rather the sort of how this is attached to a the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry and various other things. You know what I'm saying? Like if all of this was being done in a spirit of goodness, it would not represent itself in the way that it is now. You see what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like there's not there like I'm not just saying no to all of these things. I'm like this is a people think that I like want to do commit trans genocide or something like that. It's completely absurd. Like I'm so far away from caring about that. Like I have trans friends. I don't care. Like a lot of people who are trans, like they're also just as much opposed to like pushing this in this particular way or whatever. And like I don't really care about the gender stuff either. I don't really believe like gender roles, blah blah blah. Don't care about any of that. Doesn't matter to me in the
But what do
slightest.
you think? Okay, I have a question like following up on that. What do you think? Like, there's some people could argue like there's a legitimate biblical argument against this. If you want to say like corruption of sexuality and all this, and you could see in the Old Testament and New Testament. So how would you respond to that, for example?
Just as much as there's corruption in every other thing, like I mean, obviously, like in the same way where I would be like, hey, if you probably shouldn't do heroin, you know what I'm saying? Like, I
Right.
don't think
Yeah.
it's good. Probably shouldn't do it. It's probably not going to be good, like the best thing for you or whatever. That's how I feel. Like that's how I feel about biblical injunctions against like things like sodomy and things like this. Like like it's more of like a word of advice. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
this
Because
ain't it. This ain't it. You know, that's not the
right,
best
right.
thing you could be doing.
I think the way I found to respond to it is basically saying that if we ever get to the level where real transhumanism is compatible with social relations, it's not something that's completely alienated, and the same thing for transgenderism, then we have objectively went beyond man. We're no longer men anymore, human. We're something else. Because if transgenderism really becomes like absolute in a sense that is it is possible, it becomes a condition of social relation, then yeah, we're no longer human. So
Well,
it's like
I would say
yeah,
that's all we've already like the only reason why this affords itself is because we've already transcended like this notion of humanity um that existed in the past. Like if you just think of the amount of body modifications and medical technology and things like this, like at what point did it become transhumanist? Like the first heart transplant, was that transhumanist? Like
right.
there's a million examples that you could give to like when this ended. I would point to Kajev also, where the question is not so much one of man at this point, but is one of man as animal or man as machine is really the question that we're faced with now. Because man as animal is like the more progressive force actually than man as machine. in this moment of history. Like I would use the example. Let's look at Israel Palestine right now. What do the Palestinians want? They just want to satisfy their most basic, you could say, animal desires. They want food. They want shelter. They want to not be killed.
Yeah.
Pretty basic animal desires. But like, what do the Israelis want? Like even though on the propaganda front, they're like, look, we're talking about like creating these sorts of machines, this machinic world. Like they're building their temple or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. These are not man like they're snobs against animals in this instance, right? The Zionist snobs look down upon the Palestinian animals, right? And that's the politics going on here. So there's the machine of the IDF, and there's like the kind of animalism of the opposition, and that's even reflected in the propaganda, right? There's the impersonal drone striking and missile strikes, and the sort of even AI targeting at this point, right? The AI are commanding which people to be killed in Palestine. The IDF forces are literally just following the orders of a machine. They are lines of code. And then you have the spontaneity, the sort of animalism of the opposition. This is the real conflict we see in man now.
Right, right. I think the only danger really is when discussing these things, like you start to argue, for example, for singularity, and I think that's like the main like accelerationist fault, right? They
Okay,
argue
so
for, yeah.
I think that so with the singularity, I think is just a misunderstanding. Like the idea of a singularity is a fundamental misunderstanding of like what. So this is as Blake was just describing, right? And these things. What is this quote unquote this hypothetical notion of like AGI, like general intelligence, etc. This is literally just the rationalism, the summit of rationalism of all of these sense perceptions that have been accumulated heretofore, but it cannot reveal the new. This thing could never reveal new wisdom. It could never reveal anything new. It can only retrieve and compare the ratio of things that has been fed into its algorithm. So it's fundamentally something other than what Blake would call the poetic genius, right? Will always transcend over whatever the supposed singularity is. In fact, the singularity is a production of the poetic genius. It is just an idea that we have made
Right.
up.
So wouldn't you say that sexuation, for example, is like fundamental to the human itself?
What is
Sexuation, like sexual difference.
sexuation? Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've always found like this Gnostic union of like singularity kind of weird, you know. This is why I don't buy the arguments for like transhumanism and all that.
Well, it's like, what is transhumanism again? Is like the question, because like I was just reading, I just finished the Wolves of Eternity by Nausgard, and it's very much obsessed with like Soviet science fiction, Soviet futurism. It's like big theme in it, and talks a lot about Fyodorov and things I've written about quite a lot on here, and that I've also been interested in, like the Russian Cosmos and things like this. What is like this vision of like the philosophy of the common task in Fyodorov, etc. That we must like resurrect and create eternal life through like these sort of scientific means, that like all the things that were promised in uh, the religions of the world will become realities through arts and science, through the revelations of like art and science. um, I think that is like the competing vision, that we can have. I don't think that like there's any future for the sense of reactionary, where it's like what we need to do is degress and go back to some earlier technological edifice, and like just say put a like taboo upon further technological progress or something. I don't think there's any way to do that fundamentally. I just don't think it's even possible. So I think it's kind of
Yeah,
stupid to
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about. But like I believe in christening all of these things, all of the developments of science and technology. I just don't think you idolize it, but you subjugate it to the poetic genius of man.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, yeah.
But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, okay, that's what I had to say, you know. Yeah, thanks for
Word.
letting me on.
Thanks for
God
coming
bless.
on. Peace, man. All right, we got Solar Guy. What's up, Solar Guy?
Hi, Logo. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay. I just wanted to talk about this three-part BBC documentary called Ter Jesus. It's called Terra Preta, and it's mainly about this soil that's found in the Amazon, which is called Terra Preta, and it's stable, and it's been found to be stable for about 200 years. So you can grow plants in it for 200 years. And it was developed, it didn't occur naturally. It was developed by the Amazon civilization several thousand years ago. So I would recommend that everyone go and watch it because it totally demolishes this whole naturalistic notion that nature was that these magisterial pockets of nature that we have existed before us. No, we made them.
Yeah, yeah. Same thing's true of like there's a book called Changes in the Land, I believe it's called, which is about the Native American practices of like basically sculpting the forests and things, the hunting grounds and whatnot that the colonists encountered when they first arrived in America. I always point out like that in New England now there are more trees than when the settlers first arrived because the Native Americans didn't just like leave untouched nature. They rerouted streams. They created like weirs. They changed embankments for the purposes of hunting so that they could like chase deer along specific trails and things. They did controlled burns of various forests in order to keep the grounds open. They're like the whole like from the very foundation of our species, like really just life in general is disruptive of life around it. There is no like non engagement with nature nature itself is like this dialectical thing in that way in the sense that like an ant destroys nature when it digs its tunnels, you know, and it builds its things, or you could look at every flower and herb as a little factory which is synthesizing chemicals out of what are the prerequisite like precursor chemicals and things that it pulls out of the soil and things like that. Like that's reality is that everything is in a state of change and changing other things. There's not like this steady state of nature that exists, you know? So
Yeah,
obviously like the Native Americans from North to South America, they weren't like without science or reason or whatever you would call it. It was just performed in a different way. Like it was just described differently or not recognized as such. They were practicing, you know, animal husbandry and various different things, you know?
yeah, I agree. And none of, yeah, like it's literally like, it's like a direct affirmation of what Marx and Engels were talking about, or like what Mao was talking about deriving facts from actual practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else more to say about that other than like, yeah, you know, obvious, like this is like how you dispel ideology is like you have to go do things in reality like you should like you know like the ideology of like oh it'd be nice to I'm gonna fix up my like I think this is a good idea to do with my house or whatever even if you're like oh I'm gonna tile this in this way or whatever you only like realize like if it's a good or a bad idea if it's under budget over budget what it takes to do it as you're doing it like you learn by doing there's no like this is the whole problem with like rationalism in general is this idea that like you could account for in advance all of the things and so then you can just like plan for in advance all of the things but like an actual real plan involves the dialectical process of like engaging with the practice of implementing the plans.
No, yeah, I totally agree. But I don't know if this is still rationalist ideology talking, but I would say it's not entirely inappropriate to think about things, or like when you're trying to do
Oh
them.
no, of course not. But what it is, it's more that it's not sufficient to only think about the things, you know?
Oh
Like,
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, no, it's like you
Um,
want to avoid one-sidedness in either way. Like, there's people who are like, it doesn't matter about theory, all that matters is practice. And there are people who are like, well, practice be damned, all that matters is theory. And it's like, you have to wed theory and practice. Like, reality, like the truth, is always so simple, but it's always expressed in some sort of merger or marriage of seeming opposites and paradoxes. And this just drives some people insane because it's like, it's like saying yes and to things all the time, you know, where it's like, well, yes, you need that and you need this also. Like it's just and like there's an infinity that's derived from this sort of like combinations of things. So it's never like you can't just like be settled on that. You know what I mean? Um
yeah,
peop
yeah. Is this do you think this is how the historical nihilism that the Xi Jinping talked about? Do you think that's where it comes from? This
It's
rationalistic.
rationalism. Yeah, rationalism culminates in pure nihilism because because reason itself is a nullity. Like it's a nothing. Like it's nothing. Like the most reasonable thing for it to exist is nothing. Like wouldn't it be far more reasonable if nothing existed at all? That would make sense. That would make the most sense if nothing existed, if none of this existed, the universe didn't exist. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. So the summit of all rationalism is pure nihilism.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
This is
yeah,
even if you read
I,
Lukács and the Destruction of Reason defines neoliberalism in this exact manner, where it takes this nihilism as a basis. Whereas like liberalism of earlier times, which is even why now when you see some people who are like Alex Jones calls himself a liberal, for instance, you know what I'm saying? Like people who describe themselves as a liberal, like a classical liberal or whatever, in these days are in a lot of ways more progressive than the people who are like not who like describe themselves as a liberal or anti-liberal, but are more accurately surmised as neoliberal, because the neoliberal grounding of itself is absolutely nothing. Like neoliberalism is groundless, whereas like classical liberalism, the liberalism of the 17th, 18th, 19th century, grounded itself in a sense of like common, like it was like it's like the birth of communism come from that is this notion of like common liberties and things like this. But like the neoliberalism of today is like does away with all of this, does away with the liberalism itself. It just upholds the form without any of the content, completely short of content.
no, yeah. You know, I'm up at one of those. I attend one of the UCs over on the east, over on the west coast over here, and
Yeah.
I was in class with this guy, and I told him about this 3-volume biography of Mao Zedong that's coming out this year from Cambridge, and the thing about this biography was it told the view of it told the story of Mao from the viewpoint of the Communist Party, and he looked like he had fucking shell shock, like from the trenches. I swear to God, because like I told him, you know, they wrote this biography along the lines of the Communist Party's resolution for a pragmatic assessment of Mao, and he was like, you can't actually believe that they actually follow what they said, and you know, it just looked like he had the 1,000-yard stare. You know,
Well,
perfect
yeah,
example.
this is what this type of nihilism is taken as sophistication in the West, where you go like, well, of course, like nothing has ever been good or been done for good. Like everything is just fallen and decrepit and evil forever. Like, what are you, a child? Do you think there's good in the world? Everything is baseless and debased and disgusting. We all deserve to die. What are you, a child? Why aren't you sophisticated like me? Like that's really the modus operandi here. The more cynical and dejected and despairing you are, this is taken as intellectual sophistication. What do you mean Mao did something that matters? He was a mass murderer, a power hungry psychopath, just like everyone else.
Yeah, wham wham, literally wham wham wham. I mean, like, he literally fought a civil war, and the alternative was literally no different from slavery, and they
Yeah,
don't
and
know that.
this is what it doesn't matter because they take the like they're the type of people who think that when Marx is describing the ruthless criticism of all things that exist, it means going everything is bad. Like, don't you know everything is bad? And just like looking, it's the evil eye, it's the unhappy consciousness of Hegel is what predominates, especially amongst the quote unquote intellectuals here. That's not what you see so much amongst the many. This is reserved for the few. This sort of outlook. You know, if you could be a hedge fund manager, be like, don't you know it's all just fucking nothing? It's all just money. Everyone's greedy. It's all just about. It's just a game. None of it means anything. Like that's what sophistication is here. Is the summit of nihilism.
No, yeah, no, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, thank you for bringing me on,
For
and
sure, man.
I want to advertise just once more that you all should go and watch the the Terra Preta series because it just completely completely demolishes whatever those naturalist losers that you interact with throughout you. All right, thank you.
All right. Peace out, bro. All right. We got Leithmo. What's up? What do you want to talk about? What's going on?
Hey, Logo. It's good to finally speak with you.
What's up?
I wanted to I asked you a question about the fearful symmetry in regards to the differences between Blake and Hegel's conception.
Yeah,
And I wanted to read this little paragraph just so that everyone knows what we're talking about,
for
real
sure.
quick from the book. This is page 259, The Refiner in Fire. There is then an evolutionary process in time, and at each stage of this evolution, the highest form of existence becomes a medium of los. Now that men have appeared, is there any evolution in history corresponding to the preceding evolution of life? If we look at the sequence of seven eyes, we can see that in the last 6,000 years, there have been some concentric expansion in their progress, that civilization has been gradually covering more and more of the world, dispersing more mysteries and making increasing efforts to unite society. Blake also postulates a historical process which may be described as the exact opposite of the Hegelian one. Every advance of truth forces error to consolidate itself in a more obviously erroneous form, and every advance of freedom has the same effect on tyranny. Thus, history exhibits a series of crises in which a sudden flash of imaginative vision, as in the French Revolution, bursts out, is counteracted by a more ruthless defense of the status quo, and subsides again. The evolution comes in the fact that the opposition grows sharper each time and will one day present a clear-cut alternative of eternal life or extermination.
Yeah. Do you want me to respond to that? I've thought about this
Yes.
because you sent that to me. This is true until it isn't true. I think that, like, in the same sense that you could say Marx presents the exact opposite form of Hegel, when really what it is the same thing, but like from opposite perspective. Like, it's the same structure. It's just described inversely. So like, because if you read the Four Zoas, it doesn't end with just like the universal enslavement of man to error under this newly perfected error due to the procession of the truth. It ends with actually everything coming into accord, right? The end of the Four Zoas, where you have Urizen is actually brought, like, realize, like, recognizes his own error and is brought back to like his humble station amongst the Zoas, et cetera, et cetera. So in the same way that you could say like this compounding of error, um, after like the movement forward of truth, is like the counter revolution, et cetera. that's still like, even if it's getting worse in the sense of, you could say like, why do people see like the Antichrist being manifest in, you could say, the like anti-communism of today, right? Where the like all of these, or like you can see like these various error, like, back in the day in the 18th century, you had like the Freemasons and the Protestants like fighting against the Catholic like error, you could say, right? And then
Hmm.
these new truths came, and then those errors have sort of consolidated, where you now see like you have like the dispensationalist, ultra dispensationalist Christian Zionist Freemasonic types allied with the same forces in the war of like anti-communism, where you have like, you have like Baptists teaming up with papists in order to fight the communists and things like this, right? Like,
Hmm.
so it could seem like, oh, error is just getting stronger and stronger because it's consolidating, and this will probably culminate in like the most erroneous and idolatrous thing, like, right, this most erroneous and idolatrous hegemony against like the most self-evident truth. And this is like the Antichrist is this most
Hmm.
erroneous thing here. But the story doesn't end there, right? It goes like there's another dialectical translation where the truth is it wins in the end. Like, um I think that like when Fry says like you could say that about this, like as in like you could describe this as the opposite or inverse of Hegel, I think it's more just that Blake, being actually from a completely different class background, even from Hegel, in a lot of ways is more far seeing than Hegel. Where like Hegel now, if we appreciate Hegel, it's through the inversion of Marx, right?
Hmm.
So like this is why I like Kajev, because Kajev is like reading Hegel after Marx and like Heidegger and all these other developments in phenomenology and whatnot. Then like returns to Hegel and discovers all these new things in Hegel, right? That were like probably not even known to Hegel himself, but make more sense like in retrospect. Um, I would say that's like roughly the same thing. I think Blake was more far-seeing than Hegel in that respect.
Hmm.
Because like Hegel would have described the end of history in his own time with Napoleon, but even Kajev's like he was off a bit. It was really Stalin was the end of history.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean that all makes sense to me. I mean, what other ways do you see Fry's liberalism like kind of infecting his reading of Blake?
um, it's really not that much because Fry is actually also he's like a very good liberal if you're going to pick a
Right.
liberal, right? Like he's far more broad-minded than like you could say a lot of the other liberals of his time. Like Fry was like reading. Fry said that the two greatest like the two most like overwhelming forces intellectually in the 20th century were Spengler and Marx, right? And he read both of them a lot, and he appreciated both of them. And that's what I see as like being like in this way I am a liberal in that I think there's a lot of insight on the left and on the right, and I appreciate the summit of the thought on both. And I don't think that you can dispense with one or the other. So I could say that in some way I'm a liberal like Fry is a liberal. Or even like Wyndham Lewis described himself as the most broad-minded left winger. And Wyndham Lewis obviously hugely influential on Fry. And and a lot of those Canadians because he was bouncing around Canada at the time. That is that I wouldn't say like it's just like Fry is like still in the mode of like we can look and see like that the Soviet Union obviously had its flaws. It actually like America defeating the Soviet Union, or even you could say China today defeating and existing onward after the Soviet Union kind of reveals more of the flaws of the Soviet Union. I don't think the Soviet Union was better than America at the time. And I would agree with this is another Kajevian thing where Kajev was basically saying that America was more communistic than the Soviet Union at the time. And I think that's also true. So I don't think that it's really so much of an infection so much as it is like Fry did not see or live to see what became of this Western liberal hegemony in our lifetimes. Like it's been radically different. Like you compare, for instance, like the Walt Disney World that built Epcot to the one that exists today. The one that built Epcot was like a legitimately like cosmic visionary attempt of like realizing what communism would look like in the sense of like Epcot like was like contracting with the Soviet Union, China, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Denmark, like all trying to get as many countries as it could to participate in this same project. Like it's actually truly baffling and to look back on because like these are supposed to be these like bigoted backwards like wasps and things like this, right? But they were in a lot of ways extremely more broad-minded than the hegemony that has come to replace them. Like
Hmm.
it would be much better if we had those. Like you could say, like someone like Donald Trump sort of is closer to that, where he's like, "I'll make trade deals with fucking North Korea. I don't give a
Hmm.
fuck." Like that's like an older style of liberalism, which is actually more progressive than the quote unquote progressive liberalism we have now.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, going back to Fry, you'd posted like 4 or 5 years ago about Fry's comment about fascism going international and communism going national in order to
Yes.
survive. And I was going back and looking over the Borges's Ein Deutsches Requiem.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I saw you. I saw you post that.
Yeah, and it's I feel like it's an example of the same thing where it's where the concentration camp officer is describing how Germany has fallen victim to their own ideology because
Yeah.
it's spread outside its own bounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like if you accept like irony is like or like this sort of what seeming paradox to what is quote unquote rational as being like the basis of reality, right? It's a lot easier to accept these things. So like we're amongst friends here. Like everyone in this space like we can easily talk about like we could talk about how like Hitler was like the messiah of Zionists. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
This is a thing that was like being said by what is it what's his name? Steiner wrote a novel with this as
Mm.
like the basic idea, which was that like without the Nazis, like and then you could say like, oh, the Zionists are basically just the Nazis, and it's like, well, actually, yeah, actually, perfect, yeah, exactly, it makes perfect sense. Like it seems like dialectically impossible and ironic, or you look at Ukraine, and people are like, well, how is it like a Jewish leader of this neo-Nazi state? That seems like it shouldn't make sense. Like that's not rational, right? But it's like,
Hmm.
no, it isn't. It doesn't matter if it's rational. It actually exemplifies the paradoxes of reality. It doesn't correspond to your prejudices about like your limited sense perceptions of what the 20th century was.
Hmm.
Like if you understand that the Zionists and the Nazis were the same force of like manifestations of international fascism, then it makes perfect sense. There's no issue at all reconciling that. It's like I don't
Hmm.
have to reconcile that, it's there. I don't have to do it, it's there, I see it, I'm not it's reconciled in the world.
Yeah, that reminds me. I just finished Boris Grory's a communist postscript where he makes the assertion that the Soviet Union being a dialectical state was able to approach reality as it is. Um,
Yeah, well, he also, I think the most interesting thing he says there is that like the abolition of the Soviet Union, like the self-destruction of it was like in a way its ultimate project was
yeah, I'm
like
curious if
yeah.
you agree with that.
I think it makes sense because well because I'm more on the side of like China on this instance, where it's like
Mhm.
I like Mao being like, "Fuck the Soviets, I'm siding with Nixon," makes more sense to me than like being like trying to like rehabilitate Khrushchev and all those guys. Like I don't
Mhm.
care much for that. I look at the later Soviet Union, like post Stalin, as being kind of kind of like more represent like kind of seems to me more like as America has become now. Like we kind of have the same issues that the Soviet Union had. We sort of inherited them.
Mhm.
Um, in a because in the same way, like dialectically, like we had to build like a competing system with the Soviet Union. So in a lot of ways, there's like this mutual interpenetration and influence where it's like there's not really a difference between like this is like the USSA at this point, right?
Mhm.
And it suffers from like the same issues that the Soviet Union had. So like I think like I feel like also I've talked to tons of like Russian immigrants and things like who left the Soviet Union and like or like second gen and their parents were all like this is America is just the Soviet, it's the same thing, like it's all become the same. So I do
Mhm.
think Like in the same way, like you could say, like the ultimate progress of American communism would be for America to abolish its own empire, right? Just become a normal
Right.
country. That would be the best thing we could do for the prospects of communism. In the same way, I think that the USSR did. Like the USSR abolishing itself made everyone think communism was done. Like people have gotten so proud and high and mighty about communism in the West. But they go like communism, that's been disproven. It doesn't work. It doesn't even exist. And it's like China, and they go, well, China's not communist because they're not the Soviet Union. You see?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
yeah, I think it makes sense. In the same way that like the reforms and things, like I like Deng. I don't think that there was a betrayal of communism in China. I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, you got like Westoid ultra leftists who would say that like who think that they're like they got like a little portrait of Mao that they like pray to or whatever, and they're like the sede vacantist
Hmm.
Catholics, where they're like, no, like I'm the true Mao, and like Xi Jinping is like the fake pope who's the pope or whatever. It's funny.
Yeah, I posted a while ago this quote from Stalin. He says where he's talking about the title is Stalin brands as Talmudists all those who believe that Marx's dogmas are everlasting.
Yeah,
Right? There's some true uh, that you have to take Marx as he was, as he wrote everything, and not trace the evolution,
yeah.
not match it back to reality.
People take it as this dogmatic thing, and they do so in order to not have to account for all of the changes in the world, like almost 200 years now hence, like almost 200 years, like they don't want to take into account like how actually everything's completely different, like the economy doesn't work the same way. um like they try to fit everything into these 19th century categories, and it's like we're so far beyond that. Like you don't understand how far beyond that we've gotten. Like the stock market that existed in Marx and Engels time is nothing like the one that exists now. They're completely different entities.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't 401ks when Marx and Engels were writing. Like it's a completely different reality. Just as two like trivial things, but I point at these specifically because in like it's like one of the last things Engels wrote, like in like part of the like a postscript or whatever to the translation of the third volume of Capital, where he's talking about how much the stock market has developed since they wrote this, like
Mm-hmm.
so I agree. Like, if you're a communist today is not the same thing as a communist 100 years ago. It shouldn't be. It wouldn't make any sense. It'd be like saying a person today is the same as a person 100 years ago. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to go back to the nature question, because talking with that guy who said we were just hubristic apes that need to rearrange ourselves according to nature. you know he replied to me that he said that his will is his god.
Yeah.
I can't see how you can say that your will is god and hold nature as being a supreme value. It seems like those two things conflict.
Well, it doesn't if you realize that nature here is actually representing the economic order. So what he's really saying is that his self-interest is his God, his economic self-interest is his God in this economic order. So he's basically saying the world should alter itself in order for his self-interest to flourish.
Right, but it's always framed in the opposite, that
Yes.
somehow your will is perfectly aligned to nature, that these things are actually synonymous.
Well, this is someone who probably is like, not in debt, probably petty bourgeois. It's a very petty bourgeois ideology to uphold.
Yeah, I'm curious what people read to get into this stuff, because I just don't know where they're coming from.
Usually, the pessimists, usually like
Yeah.
Schopenhauer, and it's just cosmological pessimism is what it is ultimately. But it's funny because they never go far enough. Like even if they like read Schopenhauer, like if they go far enough, they would just kill themselves. Like
Right.
it's like because Jeff says that only the like pessimist and nihilist who like stays alive is interesting because like
Right.
they're like a living contradiction,
Right. The greatest act of freedom is to kill yourself.
and then they keep writing that because what
Hmm.
they actually want is some pussy or whatever. What they actually want is to like get a book deal or
Hmm.
whatever. That's it pisses me off because like there's a lot of people who are like pretty smart or like literary minded in the West,
Hmm.
and they ultimately like end up at like some level where they're like it's all about like brutal, harsh like truth telling and just like the most pest like they read like Ligotti like conspiracy they like Rust Colmax themselves or whatever, and they go like oh what fucking everything's despair dude like fuck. It's
Hmm.
like all right maybe for you because you actually have desires that you believe you cannot attain. So
I was recently going through the another Boris Groys, the anti-philosophy, where he has that
that's a great one.
chapter on Jung, which is a side of Jung that I think a lot of people on the right don't talk about. It's almost like his version of transhumanism
Yeah,
of
he loved bugs. That's the other funny thing. They always talk about bug people and things like this, but the Junger like, and actually through a lot of like his like that the organization of like an ant colony or a beehive or something was always generally something that was considered like civilized or like something refined. This idea of it being like dehumanized or like lower or lesser than is kind of that's like the more individualistic thing, which i.e. like more liberal ultimately, more bourgeois ultimately. But like Junger was like he was an entomologist primarily. Like even beyond like he did like beyond literature, beyond poetry, beyond philosophy, his primary interest was beetles. So like when he's talking about like the worker, he's thinking of like worker ants.
Mhm.
Like thinking of how cool that is. Like when he looks at civilized people and things like this, he's looking at it through the lens of like an entomologist,
Mhm.
like a sort of post-human perspective, where he's
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, like through identification with your species being, right, or your class that you have developed, like as a worker, right,
yeah,
that suddenly you've gained some sort of immortality through your identity in this larger class.
yeah. Like, have you ever seen those ants that like make boats out of themselves? Like they all attach to each
Right.
other, and they like that. Yeah, like that's like he sees that as like heroic.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I feel like, going back to the, Russian, transhumanist or, cosmist, you also have a similar thing going on. You know, I guess you could describe, Jesus saying, I am the vine and you're the branches, right? This is almost a similar
It's
sort
the
of
species being like without
right.
that, without Jesus saying that, there is no concept of communism, like
Hmm.
at all. Like literally, that's why like people say that it's like irreconcilable or whatever. But I think like ultimately, that like if you could bring Marx and Engels back with a time machine, or like you look at what the Chinese are doing with Marx right now, right? Where there's that thing was going semi-viral or whatever, where it's Marx and Confucius talking about how like a lot of their
Oh, yeah.
ideas are actually in accord. We could do the same if American communists wanted to get anywhere. You would do that with Jesus, like because Marx can his ideas literally are impossible to have. He could not have had the ideas that he had if Jesus didn't exist, if Christianity didn't exist. Like
Hmm.
they point to this like so explicitly over and over and over again. It's where like even if you go like chronologically in his own intellectual development, people say that like there's just straight up a cope I see from like ultra leftoids or whatever when I like will be like, well, what about this essay Marx wrote about this that exact part, the vine? This is he wrote an essay on this when he was like a teenager. Okay, that exact quote that you brought up, he wrote an
Hmm.
essay about this. When I point that out, they go, yeah, well, it's really his family is Jewish and they had to convert to Christianity for like business purposes or whatever because like they were so oppressed by the German state or whatever. And it's like you don't think he was genuine? You don't think he meant that when he wrote it? You think he was just like writing a paper to get by? Like he was just bullshitting? That's what they say. They say it because
Mhm.
like that's what they did in high school or whatever. But it's like no, like he had to have had that thought first. Really, the whole reason communism exists is because the message of Christ is so dialectically opposed to like what has become of Christianity that it's
Right.
like you need to call it something else now.
Hmm. Yeah, on the same guy that posted, the humans are just apes. He had retweeted this Emil Choran quote,
Yeah,
which
classic.
was he said Judeo-Christian monotheism is the Stalinism of antiquity. That's like the woke is more correct than
Yes, I
mainstream
say
sort of.
yes. I say yes. So true. See, this is the thing though, where this is like why Marx read all the right wing guys. He often said like he liked the like Balzac, he liked like the ancien regime novelists and things like this because they were like they would say stuff like that, and he'd be like, yeah, 100%. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Where it's like they like are this is why Whitman was a huge fan of what's his name? God, Carlyle. Carlyle was so
Hmm.
important. Or it's like this is why the communists read Schmidt, in China. Like these things ultimately are allied in the grander sense of like revealing truth.
Hmm. Yeah, I really like going back to the Boris Groys, the Communist Postscript, where you know, he makes a critique of Schmidt's, the friend enemy distinction by saying that it's different for the communists because they're able to freely choose their enemies, versus what is it on usually it's things of your enemies are something determined by nature, right, or by their skin color or something.
Or under like well, these days under what I would call like I would say that like, the real continuity of Nazism in the American context is this notion that like your enemies are given to you based off of the like sentimental whims and the most cynical reasonings of the people in power. There's no
Hmm.
underlying logic to it
Right.
whatsoever. Like, it's like in Hitler's Germany where it'd be like, oh, the British Empire is our great ally of Aryans, etc. And then the British don't want to do deals with them, and all of a sudden the British are just Jews. Like
Uh-huh.
that's it's the same thing that happens now where it's like this person is like big progressive values, we support them 100%. Oh no, they raped some, like, you know what I mean? It's like now they're our enemy. This happens all the
Hmm.
time. Like it's completely irrational, it's completely
Hmm.
sentimental.
Hmm.
Yeah, like it's like having your friend enemy distinction chosen for you by like your abusive parents, where it's like you can't
Hmm.
be friends with them anymore. It's like why? And it's like because you know, their parents slighted us at a birthday party or something. And it's like that is that free, like that's like so now we've told you that they're your enemy or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah. Schmidt's obviously interesting, but as most things are, like you can actually elevate a lot of the failures or like the limitations of a
Hmm.
lot of the right wing thinkers by like re-perceiving them in the lines of like sort of in the lines of like communism. You kind of like make them more interesting even.
Hmm.
They tried to do this with Nietzsche, which obviously has been like almost a full century now they've been making a left to Nietzscheanism. Um, but like Kojev was kind of already doing the best version of that, where he was like, well, ultimately Stalin was the real Nietzschean compared to Hitler. You know what I mean? Like that
Well,
stuff it rings true to me in some respect.
I can't really speak to it, but I mean that's another chapter in the Boris Groys, the anti-philosophy on the Russian philosophers who were taking up Nietzsche and viewed themselves as being part of this Dionysian sacrifice to the Stalin regime.
Yeah, yeah.
I forgot the guy's name.
There were like I'm trying to remember also. Um, can't remember who that would be. It's been a while since I read that one. That was
Yeah.
really big for me when I was in college because I was like, "Oh, I like anti-philosophy. I hate fucking philosophy." Is what I
Hmm.
realized. Like I like Wittgenstein. I talked to Groys a lot. I had him as a professor
Hmm.
twice. Um, he was great. He was a really cool guy.
I'm so jealous.
One of my friends, my roommate, actually explained Minecraft to him, and then he wrote an essay about redstone computers. Like he was so fascinated by it. It was hilarious. like the computer inside the computer game. Like I think he wrote an essay that was like, "I am a Redstone computer" or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I also recently finished the Koji, The Notion of Authority, which was
Yeah,
really fantastic, and it's such a gap that that it filled in for me, because with the introduction to the reading of Hegel, you only get one look at one specific type of authority, which is that of the master, while it
yeah.
kind of skirts past the other ones that he describes in A Notion of Authority.
I was thinking about that book, because like recently, like I was thinking, like like the sort of like Maoist, like all authority belongs to the people,
Mhm.
that sort of notion, where like an ultra leftist would interpret this as being like, well, we just need everything to be governed by direct democracy, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But what it actually means is that this authority being vested in an individual is only feasible um, in the terms of like the people believing that that's the case. Like
Mhm.
Xi Jinping would have no authority if no one believed he had authority. Like, and that's
Right.
also like, we see this issue in our own system, and we believe like like in other systems, if there's not like massive distrust of the government, it's because their people are brainwashed. We're like, oh well, yeah, people approve of Xi Jinping just because they're brainwashed, and they'd be punished if they didn't go along with that because they're being ruled like top down or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just kind of funny because like the whole problem of our system right now, like even the World Economic Forum is like their new platform is called like rebuilding trust or things like that. It's because
Mhm.
this authority actually does lie with the masses. They can't get things done if people don't believe in their authority. So I actually do have to like not compel, but to entice, if not seduce, the voluntaristic giving up of authority from the which is always with the masses, but to them, right? Like
Mhm.
they can't just take it. It's not possible. Like this idea of a rule by complete brute force is completely unfeasible.
Right, and and Koji even says that rule by force isn't true authority, right?
Yes,
Because authority is something is based upon recognition that, um, and it's not something that can be coerced.
exactly. This is why also like when we say anarchist, like we'll get more, all these paradoxes that this corner, our little corner here, has become well known for. Um, but when we say anarchists are fascists, like anarchists are the real fascists, it's the same way because they're anti-authoritarian, so they can only believe in the rule of force. They don't believe that authority exists, so they only
Yes,
believe in force. So they can never truly have authority. They can only have force.
yes, the anarchist banker thing that you read a
Yes,
while
yes.
ago. Yes.
Pessoa, yeah. You see this all the time though, where it's like they're the ones who are like, well, we just need to force. Like that's their whole thing. Like there's never a notion. They have no concept of authority. It doesn't exist for them. They don't believe in it. Like that's why they are anarchists. That's what
Yeah.
distinguishes them. Like they're like no mommies, no bedtimes. Like that's their thing. Like they like the other thing is right is like you realize this when you're a parent, right? It's like it's not only that I have authority over my child because I'm more powerful than them, but like they believe that I do. Like they need me to have that. They look to me for that. Like even if I didn't want it, even if I was like I don't feel like they look to you. You are the authority. They vested it in you. Like, it's not a child is not just this little mindless creature, a little worm, though they
Mhm.
start out that way to a bit, but they place authority on you. Like they're like, please help me, like all the time. Like that's like you have to answer the summons. Like that's really what authoritarianism is when someone's like, the masses are pleading, like they're pleading, like they are trying to vest this authority somewhere. Someone needs to do something, that's where it
Mhm.
comes from. Like, you don't build that authority yourself. You're like getting it from people.
Mhm. Yeah, at the end of A Notion of Authority, Koji does an analysis of, I forgot what's the name of the leader in France at that time. Um, I forget his name, but
De
he
Gaulle?
basically, um,
No, I'm trying to
no,
remember too.
he was a general.
Oh, fuck. I can't remember.
Yeah, but he assigns him what I don't have the book on me at the moment, but there's the authority of the father, master, judge, and I'm missing the other one.
There's like one that's like related to like the project.
Yes, the leader.
The leader, yeah.
Right. I'm curious what you would give someone like Trump, considering his successes and failures. It seemed like he did present a project, so that would have him as a leader, but he seemed to have failed as a master.
Well, he failed in general. Like
Right.
he's failed across the board. Like
Mhm.
obviously, like
Right.
but yeah, I think that like all of those types of authority are like what like in this sort of vacuum of authority we have
Hmm.
today is what people are looking for, is someone who would embody all of those things. So we need a project, but it's like if you even think of like people would what the hyper feminist way of looking at this would be like the authority of the father. What, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
there is a lot to that. Someone I forget who came up with the notion. We're calling it a patriarchal communism, but it really is like the authority of it's the five heads of communism are all men, and that's not a coincidence.
Hmm. Yeah, well, maybe because it's one of the most natural ways of transmission, right? That of the father, and
It's also just materially based in the
right.
sense of like even if you this is what I like even as much as people talk about changing gender roles and things like this, etc., there is still ultimately if you're like there's just things that are expect this is where a lot of like the red pill blah 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 stuff, manosphere stuff is like somewhat correct, is that like there are like different expectations no matter what anyone says of
Mhm.
men and women. Like doesn't matter how woke you are or how much of this stuff you've read. People, it's not rational, it's pre-rational, it's purely material in the
Mhm.
sense of like men are literally more capable of killing and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good book though. I mean, obviously I highly recommend all of Kajev. We're getting more of it translated year by year too, which is always good.
Yeah. Yeah. His isn't his correspondence to Stalin is supposed to be published
Someone the
at some
letter to
point.
Stalin translated it. It's I read it. You can find it. I think it was like published in a journal or something, not as a
Hmm.
book, but you can read that. Um, it's more. I'm most interested in the book. His book on Kant, I think, is coming out in English soon, and
Hmm.
there's a project to work on his writing on like quantum mechanics and stuff, which I think will be amazing. I'm really hyped about that.
Hmm.
It's kind of fun to like be. It's kind, or at least kind of funny to be like with like the process of translation being like behind. It's like I've sort of appreciated this with One Piece,
Hmm.
where it's like this thing comes out and there's like a wake to it that takes a long time to like build up, and then it like is translated into like the animated version. So it's like you can sort of see like the news of this concept like leaving this massive wake like in time. So it's like Kajev's book. Like Kajev died long ago, but like his books, like his work is still like leaving this wake. Like it's still being translated and proliferated. I think that's like the coolest thing.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about, man? I feel like we're kind of circling the same sort of idea, but
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've recently been reading Der Mann ohne Eigenschaften, or The Man Without Qualities,
yeah,
by
great
Robert
book.
Musil. I'm curious if you had any thoughts on it.
It's been a while since I read Musil. I have it. I actually have like a first edition that I got from my great uncle of
Oh,
like the
cool.
English translation. It's one of like my most like rare books, or like the one that I could sell for the most amount of money that I have. Um, that stuff's great. I just place all of it together, and like those are like that's like up there one of the best modernist novels, up there with like Proust, up there with all of those guys at the same time, up there with like Mann and all those guys. Uh, It's been a long time since I read it though. He
Yeah, I
also
like
wrote
how
Turtles, right?
there's like no plot to the book.
Well, when see, this is the thing though. When there's like no plot, it's like usually it's like that's like plot is like the most boring thing in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
plot sucks. Like if you can summarize a book by describing its plot, then it sucks. Like it shouldn't have been written. Like, it's all about things that you can't summarize in plot. Like that's really what's interesting in literature is when it transcends plot. It's like that though. Yeah, it's like you just have to read it. It's experiential
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
it's
I
great.
think one of my favorite characters has to be the general who goes to the library and is overwhelmed by the reference books.
Oh yeah.
That's so great. Or tries to uh, create like a map of the battles of certain ideas on like his on in it, like he's like wargaming.
Yeah, it's like such a presentiment of like the Paradox games like mods and things like that.
Uh-huh.
I think someone made a mod where I'm in it. Someone told me that once.
Uh-huh.
Where I'm like a faction leader that exists in one of these like map game mods. I don't even know what game it is,
Hmm.
but I'm sure someone could find it. If you look it up, I'm sure you can find it. I find that so fascinating. I like map games. I only play Advance Wars, but um that whole notion is very funny to me. Like I think that like the true accomplishment of like post-historical being, like under communism, like at the end of history, when all of these things have been solved, we're just gonna play out all of these things for fun for
Hmm.
forever. Where it'll be like just making up this nonsense, these like ideologies and things to like war about.
Hmm.
We're kind of there already in America, obviously, but what's interesting about our time is that like we still have time for one of these math game ideologies that just exist, quote unquote, on the internet, and in that way are like somehow like immaterial or whatever. That this is going to translate into reality in our lifetimes. Already is, and people are very worried about that. That's really what wokeness is. Also, it's an internet ideology, internet
Hmm.
mediated ideology that is like invading the rest of the reality. But I think there's going to be more of that. So we're in
Hmm.
an interesting time where it's like video games are more real than reality because video games are like it's like all we got. It's all we got now. That's
Hmm.
like the whole entertainment industry is getting sucked into video games. Gaming is everything now. I've made my peace with it. I don't really feel like being an anti-gamer luddite anymore because there's no turning back. Like there's already been a generation that's effectively illiterate due to this change in media environments.
Right. Yeah.
There's no way of forestalling it. So now the real question is like, how do you make good games? Is a question I think I've always thought about, like a literary game, like a very like good video game. I gotta play Disco Elysium. People tell me because that's apparently like the one.
Hmm. Yeah, I wasn't much of a gamer child growing up, but the one game I did play was SimCity.
SimCity is so fucking good. I
Yeah.
love those sim games. Like those are the best. Zoo Tycoon, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Sim City, fucking the railroad one. There's like the Sim
Mhm.
Railroad one. That shit
Yeah,
rocks.
yeah. It's like there's such an outlet for central planning and for the organizing the commons that's just going wasted.
Well, it's like I was looking at there was that video of like in China they had like the remote operated
Right.
mining stuff, and I was just like, this is so sick. Like you can see how things are going to be when this technology gets implemented to the like imagine like because it's like people think like, oh, communism, you're going to go make me like work in Siberia or whatever. It's like, well, what if it just means you have to like dig a hole like on your laptop?
Hmm.
like like you'd be playing, like you could be on your Discord server bullshitting with your friends as you're manning a thing in literal Siberia, even digging making the canals and what are all the various, or like digging holes for the paving of the giant like Trans-Siberian Railroad that'll cross into Alaska, the land bridge, etc. Like there's no reason to think of it as like having to take human slavery. It's like you could literally do this for fun almost. Like I feel like that would be fun. Like I
Yeah.
would love to be commanding a bulldozer on a drone. Like it's sick. Like RC cars. Like who doesn't love this shit? Like
Hmm.
it's amazing. Or like I would love to you're like, oh, time to log in for work today. Got to work on the asteroid mine. You're like drinking your Monster Energy at your desk. You're like mining for minerals like a bajillion miles away. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You don't need space travel either. You don't need to go anywhere. You can just do it all from here. It's pretty cool.
Okay, thanks, Logo. I'm gonna hop off and let
Yeah, I
some
was gonna say I
if
was
they
gonna move
want
on,
to.
but thanks for coming on,
It
man.
was a pleasure.
Peace. All right, we got Angelomorphosis. What's up? What's up? You're on. You can talk. Oh, they left. All right, Benign. Eureka Maoist. You're up. What's
Yo,
up?
what's up, man?
What's up, man? What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about. It was two things. First thing was about the nature
Yeah.
issue. Yeah. Because I was talking earlier. I can't remember who mentioned it, but it was about uh, the relationship with. I guess. Let me rephrase it. Sorry. Let me rephrase it. Basically, there's a tendency. I think. Whatever libtards do. To like kind of put on nature like kind of the sort of mystification, right?
Yes.
And this is very pronounced in my country, where I guess I don't know if it's the same thing in America, but like the association with the first people, like the indigenous, the Aboriginal, the
Yes.
Indian, I don't know, with like a kind of pure, unmediated form of like a relationship to the
Yeah.
land, all this
Yeah.
thing. And I feel like, I mean, I don't know if you recognize this too,
It's
but
racist.
it is racist, but that's like kind of like that's like the first observation you can make, and it's
It's
true.
patronizingly racist, like in a cutesy way.
Yeah, it is, but I feel like it also has another sinister underbelly where
Oh yeah.
it kind of puts on them the burden of like
Yep.
having a living relationship to the ecology,
Yeah.
whereas we can it kind of like lets us kind of be separate from it. It kind of
Yeah.
gives us permission to be estranged from it eternally. And so, what do you think about that? Do you think that's something? How does that overcome? I guess
Okay.
in new world countries like ours.
Well, I think it's ultimately from like the fact that a lot of these people like fetishize the indigenous or whatever, have almost like no contact with them and don't realize that they're just like the rest of us at this point. Like Native Americans in America, like they also, go into the army and they listen to gangster rap and they watch Netflix and they run casinos and they have the same drug problems that the rest of the communities in America have. And they're that's you know what I mean? Like they're not really different. It's not there's no real
Yeah.
intractable difference. Um, I'm just gonna mute you for a sec because you got like wind blowing through you. But I was gonna bring this up. I also see ABC down here, and we were talking about the curse. But there's a great scene in the curse where there's the Native American artist and the liberal Whitney is the like liberal white woman who's like trying to like it's like fetish like oh the first people's art like so rad like so indigenous so like authentic etc. And they're meeting up with her and like one of her friends who is putting on to fuck with and troll the liberal white woman this notion this like mystical medicine man persona and he's like yes the eagle flies and like just like talking in complete gibberish but like in the form of like this thing and like and she's like completely incapable of seeing it as a joke like, and like she's not in on it, like she doesn't get it at all that he's like being extremely cynical about it, and like making fun of her fetishization of indigeneity or whatever, which is also like what the artist is doing, the Native American artist in it, etc. That's and
Yeah.
there's another irony in it where like the only person who like becomes friends with or like under they like basically are the same, they vibe with each other, is like the extremely cynical Dougie, who is like the reality TV show producer, because they're both like aware and bonding over like the fakeness of everything and just talking about how fake this all is and like how everything's just like this exploitation of fakeness, where like the people who buy into it are like people who are like oh the solemn Native American ceremonies, whereas like meanwhile the Native American communities are like mostly interested in like their like tax incentives and like the land estate developments and like getting money around, you know what I mean, they're like just much more pragmatic, practical, normal people than they're not like, you know, out there dancing naked in the woods or whatever. That's actually an extremely like liberal white person phenomenon or whatever, is to like be so fetishistic and do like, you know, we're gonna all be nudists and stuff. Like the Native Americans aren't doing that bullshit.
Yeah, that really speaks true to my experience, and I kind of feel like the irony is that like, yeah, I think what you're speaking about is the need to recognize actually a fundamental equality,
Yeah,
or kind of a sort of something in common between, you know, the way all of our experiences are under this particular historical moment. Like, yeah, you know, Aboriginals, they also are on, you know, TikTok. Aboriginals are also on, they're drinking water from the same tap systems we do. There's a kind of
yeah,
like an infrastructural equality that is
yeah,
ignored or taken for granted. But and at least like it's funny because you also, this relates to the question before about the difference between like the classical liberal and the kind of neoliberal, because I feel like the progressive in this country really they see the Aboriginal as like a spiritual aristocracy. Um, they don't they the idea of just stressing basic equality between like white and black is seen as like no, that's conservative, that's not actually
yeah,
progressive at all. What's progressive is to elevate them.
yeah. That they're better. They're like closer to God. You
Well,
know.
they're from the garden, you know, like you know
Yeah.
when colonization's like the fall, that's like
They're
the
like
you have
frogs or like bugs, where they're closer to nature. And like we white people, we're so far gone, you know, we're so far from that. Like we're just like so advanced that we've like lost touch with like, you know, the important things like, you know, huffing gasoline. You know, like this is it's so
yeah.
patronizing and like disgusting, but that's really how they think.
And it is because it does assume a sort of fundamental, like you know, like supremacism, where it's like, yeah, because we're so advanced, that actually makes us worse. It's kind of like it's this weird paradoxical inversion of like of traditional European supremacism on its head, but it's still like the same in content. It's still the same in practice. It's very strange.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this one section. Blake obviously has a great thing that's exactly like this, describing oh God, where is it? It's like the patronizing way in which the Eurozone, this sort of worldview, acts like it's being charitable, where it's like it's just humiliating. It's like they're like, oh, like humiliate yourself for me as I pretend to humiliate myself, but I'm actually being even more proud than you could imagine. Like
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how else to
It's
explain
exactly.
it.
No, no. I know what you mean. It's like it's kind of like when people put themselves down, but specifically to elevate themselves up, which happens all the time, especially in
Yeah,
the
there's
corporate world.
Yeah, there's like a Zizek. Zizek used to like basically the only things I really appreciate Zizek for is where he passes along jokes. Because I do think, and I do agree with Wittgenstein that philosophy should be composed mostly of jokes. That like jokes are like the most efficient, usually the most efficient way of like
Yeah.
explaining something. But it's like a bunch of like rabbis or whatever, and they're like at a Rosh. I don't remember what it is specifically, but you know, there's like these people of like high prestige, like a landowner who owns a ton of land, and he goes, "Oh, I am nothing. Oh, I am nothing before God." And then like, you know, another man who owns a ton of business, he goes, "Oh, I am nothing. I am nothing before God." And then this poor guy comes in, and he goes, "I am nothing before God." And they go, "Who is this guy? Who does this guy think he is?"
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my favorite little bits from Zizek. It was so funny. And you're right. Like I think philosophy kind of relates to the you know Groys's notion of paradox, right? that's what a joke is. A joke is like this contradiction, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same structure, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Precisely.
it's so cool. But yeah, I guess like so as far as like then like on a mass scale, like how it is that like the New Worlders can become like indigenized. Like isn't that kind of the ultimate aim? Is like we will like WASP America or WASP Australia needs to like become indigenous, but like that's kind of seen as like an impossibility here. I don't know
Well,
if
they've
it's
done
different
it to
in America.
themselves to make it impossible because it's like you look at like, like I don't know, but the high school I went to, the mascot, I think they changed it. I think they had to change it. Was the Warriors, and it was like a Native American thing, right? And we had like we had like we had like white kids who were like go to the local Native American tribe and like learn like the dances and things and do them at like
That's awesome.
halftime shows. No, but like they had to get rid of it because like then white people were being offended on behalf of that community to like remove
That
it.
is that that
You know
is
what I
that
mean?
is that is so. I always find that so strange because like it's almost like a literal kind of patronism in terms of like clientele relationship where like oh no we're gonna be offended on your part. Um, I find that the most bizarre form of patriotism. Uh,
Patronizing, yeah,
yeah.
it's extremely disgusting. I
Is
hate
there
it so
is
much.
there is there a like connection between like patronizing in like the sense of the client relationship and the way we use it as a way? Is that a thing or is that just like an association I'm just making up out of nothing?
No, definitely how patron client tends to work. Um, in the sense, like if you're patronizing, it's like you are above, right? And so you're like you're stooping down to like give these people money or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you're and
Yeah,
like you have to also do a sort of performance where you're like representative of them. So if you're like patron, you're like this is like more like virtual patronization too, like you could say that's what makes it especially despicable because it's not like the people who
yeah,
are like, "Oh, I'm offended on behalf of these people." It's like, okay, but what are you doing for them? Like, you like
yeah,
if
yeah,
you were doing something for them and you were offended on their behalf, like, okay, like I guess you know what I mean. Like if you're like I can understand when someone who's like, I have a lot of like mentally disabled people in my family, and the word retarded is offensive to me or something. It's like, okay, I can understand. Like you kind of like have the privilege in a way of being able to be offended by that because it's like you're closer to it. But oftentimes people who are closer to it are less offended than people who are like
yeah.
offended in some virtual manner.
It's like that one the comedian Shane Gillis who's talking about Down
Yes.
syndrome. It's exactly like that where it's like if you are closer to that, like if you're closer to someone, you're gonna see their humanity more, and you're not
Yeah.
gonna be able to fetishize them as much because it's distance like it's that kind of extreme distance that is
Yes.
necessary for fetishization, and it's especially the case with like Aboriginals because like the Aboriginals that are fetishized are like living in like the outback where
Yeah.
all of these white liberals they live in the like as far away from that as possible in the coast. They hug
Yeah.
the coastline, so it's like they're as far away as possible, and that's what allows them to fetishize them. Whereas if they just met them, they would just know that they're just fucking people.
Yeah, it's like why there's like the grand irony in America at this juncture where you have like people in the north, which is by far whiter than the south. Like you have people in like Vermont, which is like the whitest place in all of America or whatever, and they're like BLM, etc., and they're like all this. And then you have like people in the south who like maybe they say the N word and like actually like are kind of more openly racist or whatever, except like half of their family is mixed race.
Yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I
So
mean?
yeah, I wonder though, like with the patron client relationship, because it's sort of similar. Like I wonder like how that fits in the discussion earlier about Kodjev and authority, because there is a kind of like, obviously an authority. Uh,
What's okay, so
patron.
I'll tell you what it
Yeah.
is. So there's
Go
like
ahead.
a this is like how far gone we are, right? Where the person, let's say like white liberal who is offended on behalf of something that they believe would be offensive to Native Americans, their patrons, their clients rather, are not the Native Americans, but they're other white
Right.
liberals. So they're like you see what I'm saying? Like they're performing more like the ideal of this sentiment for other people in the same like bracket. who are also not doing a goddamn thing for Native Americans or whatever.
Well, that's
But
literally like self-serving at a class level. It's like
yes,
that's so perverse. It's like masturbatory. It's so
it's
gross.
extremely perverse. And like you see this like this is like how all of like academia and shit is at this point. Or it's like the other thing, like I remember going to college and being like, I like I'm from like a lower middle class at best area. And I knew a lot of kids who were like who I grew up with and I was friends with who were in like actual poverty, you know, and like had parents who were like drug addicts and things like that. So I was never like I was like, but then I would have like some people, some POCs who grew up like upper middle class and went to like good high schools, whose parents were doctors and things like that, talk to me about like privilege and things like this. Or like I remember an Indian Brahmin girl whose family had servants talking to me about my white privilege and being like, you have no idea. Like I was like, you don't understand at all. Like, and they don't. It's just sort of like if you don't have to interact, like material, it's all about the material. Like virtual engagement with something is also not real material engagement with it. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I watched a movie about that. That's so sad or whatever. It's like go there. You have to be there. You have to like be there. You have to
You
go
gotta
to
go.
the thing
You have to go down to the people. That's the only way you can actually.
physically, like
Yeah, exactly.
materially.
Yeah.
Like this is what's very funny to me is also this was the biggest take that got me like extra that like excised from like right wing Twitter way back in the day. This is like maybe 2020, 2019 or whatever. I said, if you cannot go to a bar and talk to random people about your ideas, you're like if you're afraid also if you're afraid of doing that, you're probably insane, right? And they were like, wow, you're just telling people to go throw their lives away by it was like I was like you're all insane. Like, if you can't materially talk about your ideas with anybody, doesn't matter who it is, any person who you come in contact with, if you are not willing to talk to literally anybody at all,
Yeah.
you think you're insane. Like,
Dude,
that's a like, you have to be able to talk to anybody.
it's like, it reminds me of there's a funny tweet that I saw. I think it was from a kind of like right wing Twitter, but it was actually very on point. It was like the way that people talk on the in this on here talk about normies is like was it? It was like the what was it called? Um, uh, what was it? The trope when they a noble savage, yeah,
Yes.
like people talk about normies in the way that it's like the noble savage, and it's like it's so funny how that that connects to the conversation because like it's true. It's like there's it's this fetishization of like normality, but like you talk to people, everyone's kind of a bit fucked up because of the
Yeah.
internet. Like I don't know, it's like I don't know.
Yeah. Also, like what? There is no normal anymore. I think about this all the time. Like, what's normal now? Like for kids, for instance. Like I have a kid, and it's like, is it like is their kid gonna like? How do you? What's good socialization at this point, right? Or it's like like are you fucking up your kid by not letting them watch like an endless scroll of Skibbity Toilet or whatever? like what's normality now? I don't know. Uh,
I guess normal is like it's just being cool, you know. It's like being normal is just
Yeah,
like
no, that's like
just be chill.
now it's an ideal. Like this is also the thing with like millennials as a generation. Where back in the day it'd be like be an adult or whatever. And now it's like, well, being an adult is like an aspiration for people now. Like people who are like 30 years old, 35 years old, 40 years old, they're like, how do I be an adult? like
Yeah,
like
but
it's not that simple
that does
anymore.
that does kind of speak though to like the fact that like we have like a like in a clinical sense retarded generation where like their development has been like disrupted by
Purposefully
this.
retarded. The
Yeah, it's
puberty
like
delayed.
yeah,
Puberty blocked, yeah, generation.
yeah. I think that I guess if you have an entire generation that's like kind of developmentally disrupted or challenged or whatever, um, that means everyone's retarded, which means that everyone is like that what is normal is was retarded, and what is
Yeah.
cool and what's normal is cool, and what's cool is being retarded. So
I remember like I forget who it was. It was like someone in my family. I forget who exactly it was like um saying that I like wasn't being normal or not normal. And I was like, okay. I was like, why would you want to be normal? Like I want to be like better. I want to be like exemplary or like you know what I mean? Like I don't understand.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, I was like, I would like to be great, not normal. Like I don't know, like like yeah, I'm fine with that. And they were like aghast at that idea. I think there's also a good. There's like I can see the other side to it though, where it's like you don't want to be fucking insane. You know, you don't want to be like off the fucking grid. You know,
Well,
insane.
that's the beauty of the word extraordinary, is that it's extraordinary, is that it's not actually divorced from the ordinary. It's not divorced from the everyday. It's not special. It's still
It's the
it's just it's
sublimation of
yeah,
normality, where it's ultra
exactly.
normal. Yeah.
Ultra normal. Yeah. Well, you almost become this. You become like the aspirational. You become the thing that people look to as what is normal or
I
what
mean,
is
I feel like I
yeah.
try to do that because, like, I'm honestly like at the end of the day, I'm a pretty normal person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't do anything that insane. Like, I like a lot. Like, that was like the other thing on like right wing stuff where I always be defending like normal things. Where I'd be like, I think that like smoking pot is as a teenager or whatever is not that bad. It's actually probably pretty fine. Like, I think you know what I mean? Stuff like
Yeah.
that. And they'd be like, "What? That's insane." I'd be like, "I don't know. It's normal where I grew up, and I feel like it was fine. Like, it didn't really create that many problems at the end of the day. Things like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I liked, or it's like, like, I like the new MGMT album. I thought it was really good. Like, I don't know. Am I a normie? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's there's a hipsterism to both the right and the left online where and it is like it's like snobbery of looking down at like the kind of
Yeah,
like
but the thing is that there's also a height of snobbery where you become like the anti-snob snobs, like double snob, where
yeah
you go like all these other snobs are so snobbish that they can't even like appreciate like things. You know what I mean? And then it's like
yeah
where and then there's different levels to that also. Like there's truly an infinity to snobbishness. You can go forever, which is why it's great. Like I love being a snob about everything because like I'll be like, you don't like Linkin Park? To like a music snob, I'd be like, "How dare you not like Linkin Park? Like Linkin
that's
Park is great."
that's the best kind of that's the best inversion of the snob. You out snob the snob.
Yeah, no,
It's
you
the
out
best,
snob the
yeah.
snob by like because like the thing is that what it usually is like people are like like hating on Nickelback or something like this, something that's like generally well liked and is like ubiquitous or whatever, to the point where people get sick of it or whatever, and that's really all that they're saying is that they feel inundated with this thing. Where you go like or it's like, if you come out like you don't like the Super Bowl, like you're not gonna watch the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is like the triumph of like America of like American surrealism. Just like
Yeah.
it explains everything for you. Like the Super Bowl is like the only thing that is happening. And it's like you
Oh,
think you're above it and beyond that. Like, how dare you as a
that
snob not
that rem-
watch the Super Bowl?
that reminded me of like when it was more of a thing probably like in the 2010s, but it was like this kind of Reddit archetype who'd be like, oh, you mean the superb owl? Like they would just have this
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
dismissive like it's like you're not above it though. Like you're still part of this Roman Empire. Like you go to the circus, man. What are you doing?
Yeah, I like one example. One sec. Ah.
There we go. One example of like a thing I liked about Camille Paglia is that she did some stuff like this. I don't like all of her stuff, obviously, but I can appreciate Camille Paglia. Is when she was one of the earliest pre-Star Wars prequels revisionists, being like, actually, the prequels are great and they're probably better than the original trilogy.
Awesome.
And that's like I like positions like that. Like I feel that way about the the second Star Wars movie in the new trilogy with that Ryan Johnson did. I thought it was good. I actually
Oh yeah.
legitimately liked it. And
Oh dude,
yeah,
I was the same, and I remember like it was really sad because like I feel like the position of people who were like uh, defending Episode 8 was very pigeonholed into the stupid culture war shit, where it was like it becomes about like whether you think it's woke Star Wars is good, where it's just like, but like I don't know, I liked it. I enjoyed Episode 8. I was definitely better than the other two. The other two were like
so
very
boring.
uninspired. So.
They had
Yeah.
nothing going on. It would have been way better if they had given Ryan Johnson the last movie and let him like finish the thing that he started there. It probably would have been really good. It probably would have been cool.
Yeah.
But
They just kind of like ignored it, like just like kind of like basically pretended the second movie didn't
Yeah,
exist.
yeah. They undid all the
Because the
things.
fans were
Yeah.
mad. Fans were mad.
Yeah, like I like the idea of being like, you know what, like Luke Skywalker actually not that good of a guy. Like actually got caught in
Yeah.
the whole like liberal do you kill baby Hitler thing and was like, yeah, I'm gonna kill baby Hitler or whatever.
Yeah,
And I was
true.
like, I thought that was interesting, you know? I thought that was cool.
But people were mad because they were literally he was literally smashing their
Yes.
idols.
I was like, this is great. Like
it's great. Yeah. Like it was and like the way that like ever since then like Star Wars has lost its like mystical
it was the last chance
quality.
it had to be meaningful in any way. Like that's how people felt about the prequels though, too. Because it was like the prequels was like it was all about like it was like extremely political, you know, and like in a real way about like the end of democracy. Like at the same time as the Bush era, it was truly amazing. It was truly George Lucas was cooking on those.
Yeah, I've always I was raised in the prequels though, so like I never understood the hate. I was like, why are you so mad? Like this is like these are fun movies.
I
like,
was young enough to like have inherited Star Wars as like a cool thing before the prequels came out, so like I was really interested in the movies, the original ones, like on the first time they came out on VHS tape and stuff like that, and like I had much older cousins and things like that who were like involved in it in more of like the Gen X way that they're involved in Star Wars, like the Gen Xers are.
Yeah.
So, but then I like just liked all of it anyway. Like, you know, I liked like the Star Wars Battlefront games and shit like that on PS2. That shit fucking slapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
I
never had an issue with it. Like I liked that.
Yeah. I was like 2 years old when the Phantom Menace came out. So like I was in primary school and we went to like a used a garage sale, and there was a VHS copy of the Phantom Menace, and that was the only Star Wars media I actually owned until I got the Lego Star Wars game. And so I just like that was how there wasn't even any dialogue. Without my introduction to the entire series was just like this kind of like miming.
Well, the thing that's beautiful about George Lucas, like there's a good document, like there's a guy who like basically destroyed the Red Letter Media critiques of the Star Wars prequels, like in a just as long documentary on YouTube. I don't remember what it is, but talking about how like the actual way to appreciate Star Wars is as like a silent film, like as like being heavily devoted to like the style, like the stylization and stuff like that of like early Hollywood epics. And I think that's entirely true because like really you can watch Star Wars. I used to do this when I was a kid. Like I would just have like Star Wars on with like no sound, you know, and you just like look at it. Like it's all just really about the the whole story could be told without any dialogue, without any like you can just watch it as a thing and it's enough. Like it was created on that level to appeal to like a sort of it was like actually cinema in that way. Whereas like they're like plot, and it's like it's not about plot. It's about like Darth Vader's the bad guy because he's black. He's in black, you know, and like there's the good guy. You know, it's like it's this simple. It's like it's symbolic. It's not meant to be realistic or whatever.
It was, and it's when it's silent, it's almost like sport. Like you don't need the commentary to like enjoy the game, you know.
Yeah. That's been a fun thing to see unfold though. Is that like now prequels revisionism is like the normal thing. But that used to not be the case like a long time ago.
Yeah, that's something I will give the sequels. That at the very least, it's allowed people to look at the prequels with a bit more sobriety because of how shitty the new ones are. But
this is happening right now with True Detective Season 2 because True Detective Season 4 was so fucking bad that people were like, I'm rewatching Season 2 and realizing that it was actually really fucking good. And my opinion is like, yeah, it was like the only good one. It's like the only one that's legitimately like very good. The other ones are okay. But I've been appreciating that. There's been a lot of commentary on that. People like, damn, Season 2 actually pretty sick.
I didn't actually get around to actually watching True Detective because it's been recommended very highly to me.
The second season's the best one, easily. That's my opinion. Yeah. It's very good, but I like that one so much. Like the second season, it's one of my favorite seasons of like a TV show ever, probably.
That's dope. Yeah, I don't know. I've been playing. Do you ever play David Cage games? Like the kind of like Detroit Become Human, like it's like
No, dude,
yeah.
I like the thing. I think about video games way more than I play them. I really do. I have a GameCube. That's like the last console that I really have. Like, I still have it like around. I'm looking at it right now. I brought it with me through my whole life. I don't even play it. I just have it. I can't get rid of it for some reason. It keeps being worth more. Also, like all these games I have. I've got NFL Blitz 2003 right here. Do you know this is priceless? You don't understand?
Oh, that's awesome. No, dude, I have an old copy of FIFA 2002 that is like forever in my heart. I will never forget that game.
Yeah, I just like I think about video games, but I don't play any of them. Like also like anytime a new game comes out and it's big, like I'll watch. Like for instance, like a couple days ago, I was like, I got to figure out what Helldivers is because everyone's talking about it, and it spawned that whole like Starship Troopers discourse or whatever the fuck. So I watch enough footage of people playing. I'll be like, oh okay, yeah, I get it, and then I like don't think about it. Like I don't play it. I don't have a console to do it. I don't have a PC that could play it. I'm never going to.
Yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing about David Cage is that his games are like they're cinematic games, you know. They're not really about like systems of
Yeah.
of mechanics. They're all about the sort of like the story, and I find that I like those because I don't really. The one thing I don't like about video games is the mechanical side of it. Myself, I like just kind of being enveloped in a good story, and that's why I like David Cage. He's got a very like. It was so funny because this game is like set in like 2038, which is 2 years away from the magic number 2036. But and it's set where there's like a bunch of like androids are automating and replacing a ton of jobs. And then there's like,
I'm not gonna lie.
social crisis.
I don't care. I'm sure it's cool and stuff, but I do want to get on to the next couple people because I want to end this pretty soon. And I'm not gonna lie, I totally just stopped listening to you explaining this game because I'm the exact opposite where I don't give a fuck. Like I skipped all of the cutscenes when I played video games as a kid. I do not give a fuck about the cinematic aspect of video games whatsoever. I only care about the mechanics. That's it. I think that's the real art form to it. Honestly, like
that's kind of true. Yeah, it's kind of like explaining a dream. It's like I don't know. It's a bit difficult.
Yeah, like I just mean like to me a perfect game is like Advance Wars. It's all mechanics. The mechanics themselves are everything, and it's beautiful. And you don't need to know there is a story, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all because it's not even about the story of the single player. What it's about is about the game when you're playing against someone else, and it's all in the mind, and it's just the manipulation of these mechanics, and it's like more of like a creative it's like playing chess where it's like it's really not there's no story to chess. Who cares? Like that's to me is what's like beautiful in a game is when it's the mechanics are like that. And that's why like if I'm thinking about like stories in video games, I think it has to be entirely tied to the mechanics, like in the sense of that's why I'm somewhat interested by Disco Elysium because I think that like a lot of your like the way you move through the game or something, this is what I've gathered, I don't know, I haven't played it, like is based off of like dialogue options and stuff and things you take. So it's like you make like a choice and it changes your stats, but it also has impacts on like who your character is and like how the story is told. I find stuff like that very interesting where it's like I think that's like the most interesting thing you can do a story in a game. But if it's just like you're watching cutscenes and then it's like you make decisions and it's like changes the cutscenes, I think that's less interesting than if it's also attached to I don't know, the mechanics, like to the point of like, you know, altering stats and things like this. So it's like if you're like
yeah,
there's types of commentary that can be made. I think that, for instance, I don't know this, again, I haven't played this game, but I think that like, you know, if you're playing it in like a sort of min-maxy way, it sort of reflects in the story that's like you're doing a sort of optimal thing, and or like it sort of points to the irony of that being sort of unhuman or whatever. I don't know. Things like that are interesting to me. I like
yeah,
I
can understand that. It's like almost like it's made for the medium. It's like the whole point of the medium of video games is like is mechanics.
Yeah, like
so I can see
like Death Stranding. I don't care. Like if I play Death Stranding, it's interesting to me purely on a mechanical level of like the fact that it's like a walking simulator that's a game, and I know that there's like a ton of effort put into the cutscenes and like the story and things like that, but that's the least interesting part to me. Like I don't care at all about the if there's a
Yeah.
cutscene in a video game, I don't care at all about it. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I literally don't care at all. That's why I like the Dark Souls stuff and stuff too, is because it's mostly like just the game, like, you know, and there's other, you discover stuff or whatever, but it's not like, you know, giving you cutscenes to tell a story. Really, I guess there's those like cutscenes sort of when like a boss appears or whatever, but that's more of like I don't really think of that as the same thing. But anyway, all right, it's been nice talking to you. I'm gonna go on to these
Oh, good, man.
I got one more person, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna bounce because I gotta do stuff. But Blaze It, good name to end on. What do you want to talk about really quick? We can talk about like one thing for a little bit. Make it count.
Sorry, my mic was off.
Yeah. What's up, man?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking, found that really interesting about that whole thing about a few things about the video game thing and like this tweet that you also once did. It was about the whole Age of Saturn and like how reptiles weren't always evil thing. That's kind of been sticking with me for a bit.
And how what?
About how the Age of Saturn was once considered the golden age and how reptiles aren't universally considered to be evil.
Your mic's a little off. So that the Age of Saturn like was considered the golden age, yes, and
reptiles not being universally evil.
Yeah, reptiles weren't all like universally evil. Like snakes have often represented like rebirth and things because, you know, they shed their skin. This was like interpreted as them like dying and coming back to life and things like this.
I also recently found out about this creature called the Chalkidri, which is like some kind of like dragon. Have you ever heard
dragons
of it?
in like the East especially, or like the way dragons work, like in Chinese, Asiatic, Eastern mythology is also very different from in the West. In the West, they tend to represent sort of like bankers, you know, like they've got their hoards of gold, etc., and they're like extracting tithes from the countryside, and then you have like a populous champion come and like slay the dragon and return the Commonwealth. But in the East, the dragons also don't even have wings. Like I learned this like reading One Piece, but I found that it was actually true. But like the Eastern conception of dragons was that dragons grabbed onto clouds and like crawled on clouds like they were lizards.
Yeah,
and I thought that was so cool. I never thought of that.
A lot of dragons in Japanese and Eastern cultures also represent this way too. Like how Pokemon has like a lot of really cool looking diverse dragon types.
Yeah.
And then there's this one video game called one of the characters in there has a dragon motif, but it's more of an Eastern dragon in that he's actually more than what he appears to be at first.
Yeah. All right. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I was actually kind of thinking about some there's also kind of like about how interesting it was kind of tied to that whole thing about that dragon thing about how things can appear different in like culture about how widespread cultures can be very different and sometimes too, like how things can be seen as bad in one standard, like how dragons seem. All right, I'm sorry for getting off topic, but so like I've kind of been thinking about a lot about like how we perceive different about how certain people perceive different things, like not just dragons, but kind of like things in general. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of been sticking with me a lot too. I've also been kind of thinking about a lot of religion as well too lately. Like I grew up in a religious family, and it's always
like
been
fundamentalist Christian. I'm guessing if you say it like that.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about it a lot lately, and I've been kind of like pondering on it.
I mean, I think like I've always been. I mean, I always highly recommend reading like a lot of like world religion stuff. I grew up in a kind of comparative mythology house. Ultimately, like, you know, my father was a bit of like a Jungian, so like I got like Native American folk tales alongside like Hindu tales and like Christian stuff, obviously on like the Catholic side of my family. Lots of just like mixture of things. I was obsessed with Norse mythology when I was a kid. So Greek mythology, all of the sort of different things. I think that like they're like I read at the very beginning of this. We can wrap this all up this way. So thank you for
Sure.
allowing me to do this. But the very beginning of this, I read William Blake's "All Religions Are One," which is the preface before "There is no natural religion." But it's this notion that the poetic genius behind all of these myths and tales is the same. That they all come from the human imagination and adapted to various, as he calls them, weaknesses in the particular material conditions of humanity across the world. So, like for instance, if you're like in Scandinavia in the early millennia, early time period here, like the Vikings, etc., their cosmology is very, very brutal and stark because they're in like a very cold place. It's very
Oh,
inhospitable to life. So their understanding of what the world is and what it's like everywhere, because everyone's myths always apply universally. They imagine how the world is like, um, reflects their own immediate conditions. But as soon as they start to like interact and like with the rest of the world, this cosmology can't even uphold anymore because now their material conditions are even changed by, like, you could say, the increase of global trade. So it actually is inevitable that they convert to Christianity because Christianity is a religion that emerges from like the center of the world market, which can actually like in consciousness reflect the a sort of universal human condition in the sense of being connected to everywhere else in the world, you know? So
yeah.
like all of these developments of religion like are necessities, like
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
have to occur. So like this is like, so even like your own background of like fundamentalist Christianity, it
Hmm.
reflects probably quite a lot about like the class background of not only your parents but like your grandparents and your great grandparents, migration patterns across America, various vocations, etc. These like all of these things are tied into that thing. Like it doesn't emerge ex nihilo. Um, so I would say like the thing that, like, I didn't grow up fundamentalist Christian. I grew up with a lot of them, and I was like very atheistic when I was younger. But I've learned to appreciate a lot that exists in like the fundamentalist Christian aspect of America, and that's one thing I would recommend just for you as like even as you develop and like look at all of these other things. Like if you're interested in world religion or whatever, I would say not to do so like as like an abrogation against your own like tradition of your family or things like that, but as possibly a means of reflecting and finding new things to appreciate that you might not have appreciated. Because I'm sure, like, I didn't grow up fundamentalist Christian, but if I did, I probably would have rebelled against it very heavily. You know what I mean? Like, I just know
Yeah.
that about myself, and I'm assuming you have as well. So I would say
I
there's probably actually a lot of good in it that you might not appreciate yet.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually feel like I actually feel like that. I feel like that as I've gotten older, I've kind of been like more like taking things at a slower pace and just learn to appreciate and learn to kind of like you said, appreciate things too. So
Yeah.
like because like when you look back at life, I often have days like at this like while I have had days where I wish I could go back and like do things differently. I think that it would be better if I not do that because despite everything that happened, I'm still here. I'm
Yeah.
still here.
And
I
you
don't.
learn, that's how you learn, is by failing perpetually and making mistakes.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no perfect run through life like in a video game. You can't min max your way through it. You just have to fail perpetually. And actually,
Actually,
the more you do that, the more you learn. So the people who are like, little perfectionists and things, they often don't have much wisdom. The fools, the
yeah,
people who are completely foolish by those standards tend to have a lot more wisdom because they've
yeah.
failed more.
There's actually this one quote from a video game that I actually kind of think about that I kind of just thought now remember too, and it was actually from a movie at the same time too. It was a quote about perfection. It was about basically it was that the thing about perfection is that it can't be obtained. It can't be obtained, and that it's like you know the movie. Okay, you know the movie. It's about. Let me look it up. I'm sorry. Let me look it up.
It's all good. I do want to wrap this up though, so I'll let you find it. But then we're gonna be done. I gotta
Okay,
go.
okay, hold on. Sure. Sure. It was basically like perfection. It's unknowable, and it's impossible. The quote was that basically that perfection is unknowable and it's impossible. But like, I think that I'd like to add that even if it's that's the case, you can still like. It doesn't mean that you've completely messed up. You've just gained a new perspective. Honestly, that's what I think.
Well, I
And
would say if you look into your own tradition, I'll end it on this.
yeah, I'm sorry.
According to many, Jesus was a complete failure, right? Jesus is the Messiah, and he's crucified, and he's crucified and humiliated.
Yeah,
and he's a complete failure. He's abandoned by his friends. Even one of his best friends, Peter, denies him 3 times. He's betrayed by one of his closest confidants in Judas. He's a complete failure, and yet,
he ends up saving the day.
that is perfection. So we'll leave it there. It's been nice talking to everyone, and God bless you all. Peace.
Yeah, you too.